Welcome to the BSS DCP-555 pre-built room configuration video. In this video, we will step through two different pre-built room configurations and identify how they are being used. The option to switch between different pre-built room configurations will benefit applications where two adjoining rooms share a temporary wall. With the wall in place, the DCP-555 will utilize a configuration reflecting two different conference rooms. And with the wall removed, the DCP-555 will then be loaded with a configuration reflecting one larger conference room. BSS provides several pre-built room configurations for various types of installations. They allow you to get your system up and running quickly. The parameters changed in these configurations differ from the factory state of the DCP-555. These configurations can be found at the BSS DCP-555 product webpage. They currently make use of the conferencing template, which provides 28 inputs, 12 output paths, 12 channels of acoustic echo cancellation, and 4 AEC reference groups. They provide a simple solution for some of the most common conferencing applications, ranging from a single small conference room to a more complex quad split configuration. They are meant to be used as a starting point for your specific installation and can be tailored according to your needs. If you're unclear on how to edit a configuration, please take a moment to watch the BSS DCP-555 single room custom configuration video. To load a pre-built room configuration, download the desired type to your PC. Once downloaded, from the web interface dashboard, click on Upload from File and locate the DNP file to be loaded. This will load the pre-built room configuration to the dashboard. Next, select it to be loaded as the running configuration in the unit. You will be momentarily disconnected from the unit. This is normal. Log back in to find the newly loaded pre-built room configuration, select the loaded template, and modify as needed. Today we will be looking at two of these pre-built room configurations, the split room configuration and the combined room configuration. Let's start by opening the split room configuration. It's designed for the operation of two independent conference rooms. Within the schematic view, we find it provides us with a number of inputs and outputs already configured for two conferencing systems, referred to as Split 1 and Split 2. We can select the Overview option to easily see what types of inputs and outputs are currently used. The overview of the inputs indicates that there are 12 configured analog channels, 2 BlueLink channels, 2 VoIP receiver lines, and 2 USB channels. The outputs are broken down to 4 analog channels, 2 BlueLink channels, 2 VoIP transmitter lines, and 2 USB channels. After closing the overview and filtering any unused channels, let's now take a moment to walk through how everything has been configured. Inputs 1 through 8 have been configured for microphone sources wired to analog inputs 1 through 8. Channels 1 through 4 account for 4 microphones in Split 1, and channels 5 through 8 account for another 4 microphones in Split 2. Let's open the input channel configuration page for one of the mics. Please be aware, in regards to channels 1 through 8, phantom power is on by default. EQ is off by default, and AEC has been turned on. Input channels 9 and 10 account for VoIP line 1 and 2 respectively. Please note that while VoIP lines have been accounted for in this audio configuration, detailed information regarding your VoIP system must be entered under the VoIP settings. There you will find access to general settings as well as VoIP line settings for each line. These values should be attained through the VoIP network administrator. Once entered, the Reconfigure button must be pressed to save these changes. To access the VoIP line dialer, the displayed IP address associated with the VoIP line may be used in a web browser without accessing the rest of the configuration. Channels 13 through 16 give us access to 2 stereo USB inputs. Now you might be thinking, but there's only one USB connection on the DCP. While that is true, a BSS Blue USB may be used to expand USB channels. Up to 4 Blue USBs may be used with a single DCP-555. Split 1 makes use of the DCP's USB port to receive call signals from the far side, while split 2 is intended to be used with a blue USB. Two pairs of stereo line inputs have been assigned to channels 21 through 25, named split 1 aux and split 2 aux respectively. And finally, the always available signal generator is accessible below. For channels 13 and up, EQ and compression is left off by default. Where applicable, stereo inputs have been linked together, so that controls such as volume will mirror one another. All channels are muted to start, indicated by the mute icon. With respect to the output configuration, each room is configured with dual mono analog outputs to provide audio to up to 2 amplifier channels for local sound reinforcement. A stereo USB output is ideal for providing audio to those participating in a web conference call, and finally we have a VoIP line output. The only real difference between the two rooms is how they handle transmitting USB audio. Split 1 transmits audio to the far side using the DCP's USB port, and Split 2 is set up to use a blue USB. Now the question is, how is everything being routed? Well, we can either select each input one by one to reveal where it is being routed to, or even better, we can select an output path to see what is being routed to it. Selecting the Split 1 program output, we find that the inputs Split 1 VoIP, Split 1 USB, and Split 1 aux are all routed to this location. This allows for audio from the far side, as well as a line-level device to be heard within the conference room, Split 1. Now let's select the Split 1 USB output. Keep in mind, this output is being used to transmit audio to the far side, participating on a conference call utilizing applications like WebEx or Skype. Here we find the microphone inputs are active. They are first routed to the gain-sharing auto mixer labeled Conference Room 1. The output of this auto mixer is then routed to the Split 1 USB. This is visually indicated by the purple markers shared among the inputs, mixer, and outputs. Knowing this, we can now see, even without selecting it, that the Split 1 mics are also routed to the Split 1 VoIP output. Continuing on with the Split 1 USB output, we also see that the sources Split 1 VoIP and Split 1 aux are routed here. Please note, the only sources that should be routed to an auto mixer are microphones. The output of the auto mixer is then combined with the other sources that have been routed to the selected output. As you look through the remaining outputs, it should be quite apparent what is being routed to them. Finally, let's take a look at the AEC reference groups. AEC reference groups are used to inform the acoustic echo cancellation algorithm which signals will be referenced for processing, which include the outgoing signal provided by the conference room mics and the incoming call signal provided over USB or VoIP. In other words, the AEC reference groups are used to indicate which signals should be suppressed when entering the path of a conference room mic with AEC turned on. Considering this pre-built room configuration was designed to facilitate 2 conference rooms, we can expect 2 reference groups to be utilized. Please note, if your microphone AEC processing is not turned on, then AEC reference groups will be unavailable. Selecting AEC Reference Group 1, we first see that Split 1 mics 1 through 4 AEC checkboxes are checked. This means mics 1 through 4 are allocated to this specific group. We then notice that the Split 1 VoIP and USB source inputs have a checkbox that is enabled. This means that any incoming voices from the far side over VoIP or USB that are then projected over the loudspeakers and picked back up by the Split 1 conference room microphones will be suppressed. In other words, echo experienced by those calling into the conference room should be eliminated. Looking at AEC Reference Group 2, we find a similar configuration for the Split 2 sources. Please keep in mind that this may be altered to better fit your application. Channels can be renamed, associated with different input or output types, and rerouted as needed. Let's now head back to the dashboard. In some situations, 2 or more split rooms may have the option to be combined together to accommodate larger meeting requirements. When faced with combining rooms, audio must be properly rerouted to account for the additional microphones and loudspeakers in the larger space. Now let's take a look at the combined room configuration. As we saw earlier, we will be forced to log in again. Once we are in the schematic view, we can select the overview option, and we find it looks awfully similar to what we saw earlier in the split room configuration. Let's go ahead and filter any unused channels. Upon an initial look, we can see that the input sources are essentially identical to what we saw in the split configuration. The biggest difference is their labels, using comb, short for combine, instead of split. Looking at the output side, we find a quad mono output labeled program mix used for our local sound reinforcement. You'll remember from our overview of the split room configuration that there are two dual mono outputs respectively set up for two rooms. In this case, in the combined room configuration, they have all been combined together to transmit the same sources, which happen to be all sources minus the microphones. Comparing the combined 1 VoIP output to the combined 2 VoIP output, we find that each is transmitting to the far side nearly all the same sources, including every microphone. The difference being between the two is which VoIP source gets transmitted to the far side. It may be easier to see where a source is not routed to by selecting the source. Input VoIP line 1 is not routed to output VoIP line 1, and input VoIP line 2 is not routed to output VoIP line 2. It wouldn't make much sense to route the caller back to themselves. Finally, considering we are focused on one larger combined room, that means we will only have need for one AEC reference group. Selecting Group 1, we see all microphones and incoming call signals accounted for. With the ability to have multiple configurations available in one DCP-555, we find that as long as a user has access to the dashboard, split room applications and combined room applications can easily be loaded according to the meeting requirements for any given day. This concludes our overview of pre-built room configurations. Thanks for watching.